welcome everyone. We're just gonna give a very brief instructions of how interpretation works, since we have speakers presenting in English and Spanish. Just to use it, you will see that you have an interpretation icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see it, please press on the circle with three dots, and you will see a globe that says interpretation. You'll see a leaf of language. Please pick the one that you want, and you will start hearing the interpreter translating for you. If you need help throughout the way, or you don't know how, please feel free to email us on or text us on the chat box. And please just stay in that channel, as it's very difficult to then like switch it up, because you will miss part of the interpretation. Y buenos días a todos, muchas gracias por estar acá. Tenemos
Thank
interpretación
you
en
very
varios,
much
en
to
inglés y
all
en
for being
español.
here.
Tenemos
And we have English and Spanish interpretation.
y de speakers,
We have speakers
presentadores en inglés y en
in
español.
English and
Entonces, para
Spanish.
poder usarlo,
So in order to
simplemente
be
van a
able to
tener que
use it,
ir en
you
la parte de
will have
abajo
to
de
go
Zoom.
to the
Verán
lower
un icono
part
que
of the
parece un
Zoom. You
globo
see an icon
terráqueo y
which
dice
looks like an
interpretación.
earth
Si no
globe
lo
and it
ven,
says
aprieten en un
interpretation. If you
círculo
don't
con
see
tres
it,
puntos.
press
Ahí podrán ver
the
el icono
circle
de
with the three
interpretación.
dots and you
Verán
will
una
see
lista de
the
idiomas,
interpretation
seleccionen
icon.
el que prefieran y
You
empezarán a
will look
escuchar
at
al
you will
intérprete.
see a
Si
list
necesitan
of
ayuda en el
languages.
proceso,
If
no
you
duden
need
en
help
mandarnos
in
un
the
email o en
process,
escribirnos en
send
el
us an
chat.
email or
Y por
write
favor,
in the chat.
quédense en ese
And
canal, ya
please
que al
remain in that
cambiarlo en
channel
algún momento pueden
because
perderse
change it at
parte de la
a
interpretación.
given moment,
Muchas
you will
gracias.
lose the interpretation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lucie Robidou, and I head the team focused on all work related to ecosystems at the CEC. It's great to have this opportunity today to hear about the work that has been done by North American nature-based solution practitioners, Kurt Storlazzi, Pilar Angelica Gomez Ruiz, and Kirsten Ellis, and we thank them for accepting this invitation to share their work so that a wider audience can learn and benefit from their experience. First, a few words about the CC. We are an intergovernmental organization that was established over 30 years ago by Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and is led by the heads of the environmental authority of each country, that is Environment Climate Change Canada, and Environment Protection Agency in the United States, and Semarnat in Mexico. Our mission is to facilitate cooperation to conserve, protect, and enhance the North American environment in support of sustainable development. So we provide a unique space for decision makers, practitioners, and the public to engage on environmental issues in North America. Together, we do this in various ways. We conduct research, we develop and provide tools and training, and we share knowledge across the continent so that all can benefit from each other's experience. A good part of our work is project-based, and this webinar is taking place as part of our nature-based solutions to address flooding in coastal cities project, which we have worked on with government partners listed here, many of them. The project is coming to an end this year, and we are in the process of publishing 4 guidance documents to support decision makers as they explore the implementation of nature-based solutions to address flood risks in their coastal communities. So we invite you to learn more and download the publications as they become available on our site. I believe at this time, 2 of them are there. These are available in English, in Spanish, and in French, the 3 languages of the CEC, and they are there for you to use, to share with colleagues, so that you can move forward and benefit from North American experience on this. So without taking any more of the time from the speakers, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Kurt Storlazzi. Kurt is a research geologist at the United States Geological Survey, where he leads a team examining processes that affect coral reefs and assessing the hazard risk reduction that they provide. Kurt, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and hola and bonjour to everyone. Today, I will be speaking about a decade's worth of efforts across the United States government to assess coral reefs as national natural infrastructure for risk reduction and some of the implications of that for the public and private sectors. How we've looked at assessing the coastal protection value of coral reefs is a combination of oceanographic, coastal engineering, ecologic, geospatial, social, and economic models, basically assessing the hazard, the wave-driven coastal flooding, the role of the ecosystem in reducing that hazard, and then looking at the consequences of that, basically putting it in terms of something that matters to people in terms of dollars and lives. And if we break it down, here's an example. This is Miami, Florida. We have the ocean on the right, the bay on the left. And what you're looking in blue is the 100-year floodplain with current coral reefs. And for a building in the 100-year flood zone, it has a probability of being flooded once in a 30-year period, which is a typical mortgage in the United States, is about 26%. Now, if we restore those reefs and we rerun these flood models, now you see the green area is the floodplain with restored coral reefs. And you see the green is a smaller area than the blue. And so with coral reef restoration, the probability of flooded decreases by 20%. Now, if we then could think about that area protected by coral reef restoration, using databases as the census, we can determine the number of people protected in that zone. Using building property values, we can look at the values of the property in those things to assess the hazard risk reduction in terms of lives and dollars. Now, the international insurance industry, the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Army Corps of Engineers calculates annual risk reduction benefits through a risk valuation framework. And so we've run these flood models for different return year periods. So the 10-year flood zone smaller and protects fewer people than the 500-year flood zone, which is a much larger flood zone, but it has a lower probability. So to compute an annualized risk reduction benefit, it's that magnitude of the impact times the probability of occurrence. And so we can kind of think of the area in gray as that benefit. And if we do that using some calculus, we can compute annualized values. So we did this along all 3,100 kilometers of US coral reef line coasts. And we can compute those annualized values as over 18,000 people per year and over $2.5 billion annualized risk reduction costs. And you see there's high variability. Some of that's because there are no coral reefs, or there's large sea cliffs. In other areas, those values are very high, where those coral reefs provide a lot of protection to a lot of people and coastal infrastructure. What we can do with that then is, if we know the hazard risk reduction benefit, if we know the cost of restoration, and in this case, we're assuming it at $3 million per kilometer, what we're showing in these coming on plots is the benefit to cost ratio. If that benefits is greater than the cost, then the project has a positive return on investment. If we're looking immediately at about 2% of the areas have a positive return on investment, if those are paid out over 30 years at a 7% discount rate, then almost 20% of those areas, the benefits exceed the costs. You'll note, again, there's very great alongshore variability. What we note is that most of those benefits occur where communities' infrastructure and economic activity are located, and those are often the coral reefs that are most degraded by human-induced activities. So what does this do? If there is a positive return on investment, then all the tools used to fund gray infrastructure, such as seawalls and breakwaters, can then be used to fund green infrastructure, such as ecosystem restoration. In the US and other areas, these include restoration funds, mitigation grants, special purpose tax districts, and in the private sector, things like the insurance and reinsurance payouts, catastrophe bonds, and resilience bonds. And why does this matter? Because in the US, our National Institute of Building Sciences showed in a report that every dollar spent in mitigation saves $4 in averted damage for tropical storms. We know storms will happen. We can either spend a little bit up front or a lot more down the road. So we worked with the agencies. Here's the US Federal Emergency Management Agency's flood assessment structure tool. And basically so that we could keep sure our data could get right into their calculating software to make these benefit cost analysis. What this has resulted in, the Federal Emergency Management Agency did the first successful hazard mitigation grant award to restore coral reefs for hazard risk reduction. Basically $38.6 million US dollars to restore 7 kilometers of coral reefs off the capital of San Juan in Puerto Rico to protect their capital and international airport. The US Department of Defense is even realizing that, again, working with nature saves dollars and is very cost effective. They've launched a $70 million program to make hybrid coral reefs grow faster and be more resilient to cost effectively protect their tropical coastal military bases from storm-driven flooding. So they're making the corals grow faster, be more resilient, and provide that protection at lower cost. The international insurance and reinsurance industries are also coming on board with this. On the left is from the Lloyd's of London. On the right is Swiss Re. That is basically seeing that these kind of assessments can be used to help guide insurance, reinsurance, and bonds. If, say, a hotel protects their coral reefs, they can lower their insurance rates. If they conversely negatively impact their coral reefs, they could cause their rates to increase. Next is that now we're getting in terms of ensuring nature's coastal defense infrastructure. So the Bank of America, working with the Nature Conservancy, looked at the feasibility of ensuring coral reefs in Florida and Hawaii because of that protective service. And in 2023, they got the first ever coral reef insurance policy in the United States. I would like to say to my Mexican friends and colleagues, you were the first who did that for the Mesoamerican reef system, also with the Nature Conservancy. The policy in the US basically says, depending on how close tropical cyclones come to the Hawaiian Islands, they'll have different payouts based on the intensity of these storms and how close they get to the islands. The idea is that they would rather pay a little bit in terms of insurance so that if a storm does happen and those reefs get damaged, they get an insurance payout to restore those reefs to bring back that protection because they value it that much. So where do we stand now? Well, it's really trying to get to increase the application of coral reefs as nature-based solutions by the engineering community. We're just starting to do these kind of deployments at scale, and we need to evaluate and determine their performance to show that they are actually valuable and will be able to do what we think they can do. So that's that's the end of my presentation. I look to hear what Pilar and Kristen have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. There we go. My video was not coming on. Thank you very much. Just so everybody, I think I forgot to mention, we can be, while I see people are taking part of it, we can ask questions and the chat, and there will be a question period at the end. So without any, sorry, without any more time, we will now pass to our next speakers. Our next speaker is Pilar Angelica Gomez Ruiz. She is a senior researcher at the Centro de Investigación Científica de Yucatán, and she will be speaking to us on mangrove allies, local communities participating in mangrove restoration. Pilar, the floor is yours.
Gracias, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
¿Me permites compartir la pantalla, por favor?
Can I share the screen, please?
Bueno, espero que ya puedan verla
I
bien.
hope that you can see the screen now.
Pues buenas tardes
Yes.
a todos.
Good afternoon to all.
Como lo acaba de comentar Lucy,
Like
yo voy a
Lucy
presentarles
said,
desde,
I'm going to talk
digamos, la
about
perspectiva
the
social
social
de
perspective
proyectos de restauración de manglares,
restoration
particularmente
projects
en
of
algunos casos
mangroves
aquí en
in some cases here in Mexico, some projects here in Mexico.
Bueno, lo primero
Okay,
que quiero
the first
resaltar
thing that I
es la
want to mention
importancia
is
que
the
tienen los
importance
manglares para
that the
muchísimas comunidades
mangroves
costeras.
have
Hay
for
una
many coastal
relación muy
communities.
estrecha
There's a very
entre
close
el
relationship
ecosistema
between
y
the
los
ecosystem
habitantes que están
and the
en este entorno,
people who live in this
principalmente
environment,
porque los manglares
especially
son
because the
los
mangroves are
proveedores de
the
muchísimos
ones that
recursos
provide many resources
indispensables para
that are
muchísimas
very
comunidades.
necessary for many
Entre
communities.
ellos, pues
Among
podemos
them,
resaltar los que
we
pues,
can
podemos ver en la
emphasize
pantalla, ¿no?
what you
Madera
see on
para
the
la
screen,
construcción de sus propias
wood for
viviendas.
the construction of their own
Muchas de estas
homes.
comunidades
Many of
son
these
comunidades
communities,
pesqueras que dependen
they
en
are
buena parte
communities that are
de
fishing
pues, este
communities.
rol que
And
tienen los
the
manglares de ser
majority
como
of
los
the
zonas de hábitat y
manglers
de reproducción
are
de muchas especies de
have
aves
are very
comerciales.
high in
También estamos
fishing,
viendo ya un
and we
crecimiento
see
en
growth
el uso de algunas especies de
in
manglar
the
como manglar
use
negro
of
para la producción de miel
mangroves
y
for the
otras,
production
otras
of
comunidades también
honey,
hacen uso del
and
carbón de
other
manglar
communities have
para su
the
consumo y
use
para
of
comercialización. Entonces,
vegetable
esto
carbon
refleja que
or vegetable
esta
coal.
estrecha relación
So this very
también
close relationship
pues conlleva una gran
takes us
responsabilidad
to a
para
great
cuidar los ecosistemas, ¿no?
responsibility to
Porque
protect the
finalmente
ecosystems, because in the
vamos a
end,
ver,
what we just
pues
saw
no es además los
is
únicos
not
beneficios que vemos
the
en los
only
manglares.
benefits
Aquí
that the
les pongo
mangroves
cuatro de
have.
los más pues,
Four
importantes
of the
servicios
most important
ecosistémicos asociados a los manglares,
ecosystem
por los cuales
services
son
related to the
ampliamente
mangroves,
reconocidos a
which are
nivel
highly
mundial,
acknowledged at a world
la
level.
captura y
For
almacenamiento
example,
de
the
carbono.
capture
Ustedes
and the
pueden
storage
ver
of
que las personas que
carbon.
trabajan con
And
manglares probablemente
if you work
escuchado
with
todo el
the
tema del
mangroves, you have
carbono
heard
stool
the topic
y
of,
pues ya
stool,
hay varios estudios que
and there are
han
several
demostrado la
studies that
eficiencia
have shown the
de tanto
efficiency
manglares
that
como
the
marismas, pastos
mangroves
marinos
and
en
the
principalmente almacenar
marshes have
carbono
in
en
storing
sedimentos.
uh,
Entonces,
carbon
pues
in
es un
the
servicio muy
sediments.
importante para
So
la
this is
mitigación
very
del cambio
important
climático.
for the mitigation of
También
climate
vemos
change.
que pues, los
And we
manglares
also
son
see
como
that the
filtros para la
mangroves are like
calidad del
filters,
agua
and they
y esto es
filter
importantísimo para
water, and
comunidades
they are
costeras
very
que así
important
dependen
for the
a
social
veces de
community,
esta fuente de agua
so
para
that they, because they have this
consumo.
water source
Como lo
for their
comenté,
use.
son
And like I
hábitat
said,
y
it's our
zonas de reproducción
habitats
de muchas
that
especies
have
y varias de
many
ellas son
species,
altamente
and
comerciales.
several of them
Y
are
uno
of
de los
great
servicios
commercial
pues también más
benefit. And
valorados de
also,
los
some
manglares
other
es la
benefits of the
protección costera,
mangroves
¿no?
are
Que
the
se da
protection
frente a
of the
eventos
coast
climáticos
to,
extremos como huracanes,
for
tormentas
extreme
tropicales
climate
y
events,
fenómenos de
and
erosión costera como los que estamos
prevents
viendo
erosion
tanto de México como de
in Mexico.
el problema es
The
que pues estamos
problem
perdiendo
is
estos
that we are
manglares a una
losing the
velocidad
mangroves
bastante
at a
acelerada
very high
y
speed,
estas pérdidas están
and these
asociadas
losses are
con
related
distintas
to different
impulsores
uh,
y la mayoría de ellos están relacionados
promoters.
con actividades antrópicas, ¿no? Por
Im-
ejemplo, la transformación de
they
las
are
zonas
related to,
agrícolas
for
y
example,
agrícolas,
the
¿no?
transformation
Muchas
of
zonas en varios países,
agriculture
el
and
cultivo de palma de
aquifer
aceite, de arroz,
transformations.
o la
And we
transformación de
see the
estas zonas,
transformation
¿no?
of these
Peligrosas
zones,
para que sea otro
and
tipo de uso.
they are being
La
transformed
deforestación
for
sin
another
duda
type of
también es un problema
uses.
bastante latente en este
Deforestation
tipo de
is also
ecosistemas
a very
y algo que está sucediendo
high
también
problem. And also, I'm sorry, her audio is cutting off. I'm sorry, I can't hear her. I'm sorry, I can't hear her.
Pilar,
Pi-
I apologize. We're hearing that your audio is coming out. I don't know if it's a position of your voice, but
No sé. No, o sea, no lo escuchan bien.
yeah, I think it has to do with the English translation only. The interpretation. I apologize.
¿Prefieres que cambie el micrófono?
Pilar, es como si se te hubiera caído el micrófono. No sé si está tapado o...
Pilar, it seems like your microphone fell or
Estoy
if
con
you
mi mamá
covered it.
significa
Ahora
Okay,
que...
there.
ahora te escuchamos.
Now
Ahora
we
te
can hear her.
escuchamos. Gracias,
Ok,
disculpa.
Thank you.
no, está bien. Bueno, lo que comentaba
Okay,
era que
what I was
están
saying,
en la pantalla
well,
son
you can also see it on the
distintos
screen.
ríos que
These are
están
different impacts
enfrentando
that
pues los manglares y por
the
los cuales
mangroves
estamos
are
perdiendo,
facing,
o más
and
bien
because we are losing
pues en las 2 décadas que
in
van
the
del
2
2000 y el 2020
decades
ya hemos perdido
between
casi
2000 and
4 de
2020,
manglares a nivel
we
mundial.
have lost mangroves at a
Entonces,
world
ante
level.
estos escenarios un
So what
poco
can we do?
preocupantes y
This is
dramáticos en
very
donde muchas
concerning. And
una de
what can we
nuestras
do?
enfoques
Well,
de trabajo es la
one of
restauración.
the
Y
work
la
approach
restauración
is
desde un enfoque
restoration, and
participativo,
it's
porque
participating
esta
restoration,
restauración de
participative
ecosistemas ya no es un
restoration.
proceso
And
meramente
this is
ecológico,
not
también
an
implica a
ecological
las sociedades que están
process. It implies communities
constante
that are
interacción y
in
que además
constant interaction,
habitan los
and
territorios donde
they
queremos
live in
restaurar
the
sus ecosistemas,
territories
¿no?
where
Entonces,
we have these
este enfoque de
ecosystems.
restauración
So
participativa
this
pretende
participating
incluir a todos los
restoration includes
actores
all the role
y
players
sectores que
and
están
sectors
siendo,
that are
pues,
being
o que tienen algún
or
interés
that have
en el
an
ecosistema, ¿no?
interest
Para
in
que
the
también
ecosystems,
las
so
necesidades y
that
los objetivos
the
de todos
needs and
sean
the
incluidos
objectives
como parte de un
can be
proceso
included
y no
as
sea
part
algo
of the
que
process,
se
and that
tome una
it's not
decisión desde un
just to
escritorio
make a
y en la
decision
del campo,
in
sino
the
que
desk
también
and
es un
implement it
proceso
on the
que
field.
implique una
It
construcción.
implies the construction.
Entonces, pues cuando se vinculan las
So
comunidades a los procesos de
when do you
restauración,
link the communities to the restoration
desde el
processes?
inicio y deben
Since
estar
the beginning.
participando en todas las
And
fases del
since the
proyecto.
beginning, they have been
Lo que
participating
ven
in
a
every part of the
izquierda son
project.
las principales
What you
fases
see at your
de
left
restauración, ¿no?
are
En la
the
primera son nada
restoration,
más
for example, planning
el diseño
and
de las
the
estrategias, de
design, the
definir la fase
strategies,
diagnóstica
and
para
the
comprender
diagnosis in
de
order to
forma
understand
adecuada cuáles son las
in an
causas que han
adequate manner what
generado la degradación y pérdida del
what
ecosistema
has
para atender
caused
directamente
the
desde esa fase.
degradation and the loss of
Luego
mangroves.
tenemos la
And
implementación
then
que
we
implica
have the
todo el
implementation,
desarrollo de las
which
actividades
implies
que se
all
han
the development
escogido
of the
y
activities
una
that they
parte
have
muy
selected.
importante
And a very
que
important part
poco a la que poco se
that
destina tanto
um,
presupuesto como
they
tiempo
don't
es el
assign
monitoreo. Y sin
too
monitoreo no
much
hay
budget
manera de
is
saber
monitoring. And if we don't
si
have
las actividades
monitoring,
de
we don't have
restauración
any way of
están
knowing if
funcionando como se
restoration is
esperaba
working
o si
as was
hay necesidad
expected,
de implementar
or if
alguna
there's a need
corrección.
to implement some
Entonces,
corrections.
ahora lo que les voy a
So
presentar muy rápido
what I'm
es
going to
el
present very
caso de
briefly
dos
is the
comunidades muy
case of
queridas
two
con las que hemos
communities
trabajado ya
with which
desde
we have been
2019.
working since
Son dos
2019.
ejidos,
These are two
El Palmar
ejidos
y Tembladera, que se
in
ubican o están dentro de la
El
Reserva
Palmar y
Bioceánica
Tembladera.
de Centla.
These are
Esto
located
que
in
ven en
the
amarillo a la
biosphere of
derecha
Pantanos
es
de
como la
Centla.
ubicación geográfica.
And
Estamos hablando del estado
this
de
is the
Tabasco, que
state
está al
of
sur
Tabasco, which is
del
to the
país.
south of the
El
country.
polígono verde es
The
todo lo
green
que
polygon
abarca la
is
reserva
what
Pantanos de
covers
Centla y
the
aquí
um,
en este zoom
reserve of
vemos a los
Pantanos de
polígonos de
Centla,
estos dos ejidos,
and
¿no?
these are
El
two
ejido es una
ejidos.
forma
The
de
ejido is
organización
a way
territorial
of
que es
territory
muy
organization,
característica aquí
which
en
is very
México, donde
characteristic here in
son los
Mexico,
habitantes
where
los
the
poseedores de estos
community are the
territorios y
owners of
por lo
these
tanto son
territories,
ellos los
and
que
therefore
tienen
they are the
el
ones
liderazgo y
who
la
have the
fortaleza
leadership and the
de
control
estas áreas.
of these areas.
Bueno, contarles
Mm,
rápidamente, en el
To tell you
Palmar
very briefly, in
trabajamos
El
una
Palmar,
estrategia de
we work in a
reforestación
protected
con
area of
mangle, que es
reforestation
mangle
of
rojo por la especie dominante del
17,000
tipo de mangle
manglers
que hay en
or
esta zona.
Rhizophora
Con la
mangle,
comunidad nos organizamos
and
en
we
todo lo que
work with the
ustedes ven
community in
en la
everything that you can
izquierda,
see to your left.
en las líneas amarillas
In the
corresponde a las
yellow
áreas
lines
donde se hizo esta
correspond to
siembra
the areas
y
where
esto
we
corresponde a
planted
más de
here.
200 hectáreas en
And
proceso de restauración.
this is the
Y
area of
algo que ha sido
restoration, and
muy
something that has been
valioso y
very
rescatable del
valuable
proyecto es que
in this
desde el
project is that
2020
since
estamos haciendo actividades
2020,
de monitoreo
we
por
are
parte de
carrying
las
out
comunidades
monitoring by the communities, and they have been trained at different moments so that they can carry out the monitoring and see the growth of the plants. This is the red mango. In the case of Tembladera, here the problem was different. So the restoration activity, the rehabilitation of hydric channels, and the community manually paint 4,942 meters of channels, and they represent 34.7 hectares. And on the left, you see the polygon that was cleaned. And fortunately, uh, in 2020, there was the implementation of the action, and they installed artisan traps in these channels, and they detected that there was a constant flow of water, and they had they had uh, the different types of fish came back, and they were able to fish all these different types of fishes. And this has to do with everything that we have seen during all these years in this process. The socio-ecological benefits, for example, in this case, in this recovery of the vegetation coverage, and to have a better hydraulic flow, and they have reduced the impacts for by flooding in the rain season. These two ejidos are very close to the very big rivers, one of the main rivers in Mexico, which is the Itzumacinta, in the Ejido El Palmar, in Ejido El Tamblar, in Ejido San Pedro y San Pablo. These are rivers that have a very impressive flow of water in the rain season. And these communities suffer because of floodings. And that is why the constructions like this one, uh, in order to prevent more damage, and the mangroves uh, to prevent that the damages are worse. And the socio-ecological benefits in the community integration.
Pilar, if you can ramp up in 2 minutes, thank you.
Si pudieras concluir en dos, sorry, the socio-ecological benefits, what we have seen is that different aspects have changed in the community, and we have more social participation. They have more value to their uh, traditional ecological knowledge. They believe, they feel that they're participating and that they are owners of the process, and they have identified some ways of life which they are participating. And for these communities, they are part of a larger consortium in which we work. And this is what we, this is an organization that's called Monitoreando Ando, or I'm monitoring. And these are the communities that are part of the participation in this project. What we did was to carry out the knowledge to put it into practice, to share all the technical information, the scientific information, so that the communities can follow up on the mangroves in in order to identify what aspects are going to be varying, and or which aspects vary, and they can give us an alert in changes in the ecosystem. And as part of this project, we developed this protocol that I hope that it is available for all. And basically, these communities are part of a network, and we hope that this allows and for an exchange of experiences with other communities who are doing mangrove restoration. And this this needs many. This needs a lot of human resources and also financial support. And the mangroves are very important, and mm, we we want conservation, restoration, community participation is very important so that they can feel part of the process and that the decision of the processes are in a consensus and informed manner, and to protect the environment in the crisis that we have not only in mangroves but in the ecosystems. And mm, these these activities can be carried out by local communities and have participation and tools, and they can follow up. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pilar. Again, a very interesting presentation. I can see a lot of interesting Q&As that we'll get to shortly. To carry on, we will be now hearing from our third and last speaker, Kirsten Ellis. Kirsten is a coastal adaptation specialist at CB Wetlands and environmental specialist, and she will be speaking to us about the Shippagan Gully Conservation Offsetting Project. Kristen, floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, that's showing up for everybody.
It's good, thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for inviting me to speak about this project. The Shippagan Gully Conservation Offsetting Project is a project that used nature-based solutions to offset for piping plover habitat. And while it was not specifically targeted at flooding, certainly the nature-based solutions that were used and what we're learning about those nature-based solutions in the northern climate could certainly be applied more broadly to coastal flooding. The project was on the Sheppa Office Spit in the Acadian Peninsula of New Brunswick. It is a highly modified site that's been used by people for a very long time. There's a lot of evidence you can see in the photo of alterations, including seawalls and rock armoring. There's a historic lighthouse that's one of very few lighthouses of its type in New Brunswick. There was also archaeological resources related to fishing and fish processing facilities on the site. And it's also very important for not only piping plovers, but also migratory shorebirds and provincially rare species of plants, such as the woolly beach heather. The piping plover habitat, critical habitat, was the main driver for the project. Piping plovers are provincially and federally listed in New Brunswick and Canada, and they have well-defined metrics of the habitats that they like to nest on. And barrier islands and spits, such as the Sheppa Office Spit, are designated in their entirety as critical habitat. And this was important for this project, which resulted from piping plover critical habitat impact from the Shippagan Gully dredging and breakwater construction project. The designation of the entire spit as critical habitat allows us to take a holistic approach to designing the restoration and the offsetting. We were able to target areas outside of simply the beach nesting habitat, so the dune habitat and the back barrier wetland habitats, which support the habitats that are actively used by the piping plovers to nest and feed. And so looking at the different offsets to offset that 48,000 meters of critical habitat impact, square meters of critical habitat impact at a 2-to-1 ratio across the site, and having all of those offsets occurring on site was very important. The real goal of the project was to have those environmental benefits for the piping plovers, but to also increase the resilience of the spit. From a human perspective, having that spit intact to maintain the functioning of that shipping gully, which is a very active fishing channel, so to keep it open and safe for the fishing community on the Acadian Peninsula was really important. And to do that, the nature-based solutions that were implemented were a sand engine, so the deposition of sediment updrift of the location where the sediment was needed, and so that sediment could be moved through natural processes, longshore transport, waves, and wind to where it was needed down the beach. We created a marsh using a stone sill, and the dredged material, both material being dredged concurrently with the offsetting project, but also dredged from the gully channel, but also dredged material that had been deposited on the site in the 80s, were beneficially reused to create both the sand engine and the marsh. And removing infrastructure such as power lines, wooden seawalls, rock armoring to restore dune and wetland habitat across the site. The construction of the sand engine occurred in 2021 and 2022. A 200-meter breakwater was constructed at the end of the spit adjacent to the channel that was being dredged. This was to help keep that channel open and reduce infilling of the channel. It also functioned to collect sediment in behind it that was placed at the sand engine. So disposal site 1, DS1, is where the sediment was deposited updrift of this breakwater. And so as the shoreline process moved that sediment down, it collected behind this breakwater and built the beach to improve beach conditions for plover. In 2023, so we had a bit of a staggered construction. Was the removal of the infrastructure, the rock armoring, wooden seawalls. Oh, I went too fast. There's also wooden seawalls on the back side of the spit, and then reshaping of this dredge material into a lower slope to facilitate dune formation in these areas, and then that material moved. You can see on the back side the rock with the marsh platform behind it. And that was planted in 2023. And that was really, so towards the fall of 2023 was the end of the construction period for this project. Monitoring occurred from baseline pre-construction monitoring in 2020 through to this year, and is still ongoing. What we have seen is that the marsh sill has remained, so the green line shows pre-construction, and these digital surface models show the marsh sill since it was constructed, so the rock sill at the base, and then the marsh platform. You can see the amount of fill that was placed there to create that platform, the seawall that was removed here, and that since it was constructed, that has remained relatively stable, which has been a question in northern environments. This is probably the most northerly North American, certainly on the Atlantic coast, and so it's always covered with ice in the winter, quite thick ice, and we really haven't seen a lot of movement there, which has been really positive. This graph here is showing, so this middle 2 bars, wetland 1, so this is a pre-existing wetland that was in behind where the marsh spill was built. You can kind of see it down in the right-hand corner there. And what the brown bar shows is the total change in surface elevation over a 1-year period. And the yellow bar shows the total amount of accretion, so sediment deposited on the surface over the same period. And we can see that a lot of the change, the increase in surface elevation, cannot be attributed to sediment deposition. And what this indicates is healthy plants, and healthy plants producing a lot of healthy roots that and below ground processes that are raising the elevation of the marsh surface, and which has, benefits for flooding and keeping pace with sea level rise, and trying to avert marsh drowning. This bar is located, so this monitoring station is located on the created marsh platform. And so this is showing some settlement of those newly placed sediments, which is expected to about 2.5 centimeters of settlement, well within the range of what we would expect for that kind of placement, marsh fill placement. And we did lose our marker horizon, so we don't know what the contribution of accretion was for that year, but hopefully this year we'll get it. And we've seen the plants spreading in the matter of 1 year. They are beginning to send out rhizomes, and individual plugs are starting to coalesce into bigger clumps, which is a very positive thing to see after such a short period of time. These graphs are showing, and I'm going to focus on this top line, which is our restoration site. The second line of graphs is the reference site, so the natural site that we're collecting the same measurements and comparing to. I'll focus on our restoration site here, and these metrics are all correlated with piping plover habitat. So we can see that the beach has been increasing in elevation. 2023, I'll point it out, is a bit of an anomaly in the trend, and that was the year that Hurricane Fiona happened. And so some of this change we are feeling is probably due to the high energy of that storm. We're also seeing an increase in the backshore beach width, so the width of the dry beach area where the plovers like to nest. And we are seeing a decrease generally in beach slope, and plovers like wide, flat beaches. It's also worth noting that higher elevations, wide, flat beaches also are very good for dissipating wave energy, storm surge, and factors that influence coastal flooding. We can see in these graphs the volumetric change of sediment on the site. And so in this top, that was right after construction. And so you can see the deposition of the material at DS1. So this is where the dredge sediment was placed. And then you can see some movement down the beach and a lot of collection in behind that breakwater. That trend in the following years has continued. DS1 is eroding as expected. That sediment is being moved down and collecting largely along the beach and behind the breakwater, and that has continued, although has slowed down a little bit, which is expected.
Kirsten, if we can wrap up.
Great. And from a piping plover perspective, it has been successful. Previous to the project, plovers had not nested at the site, and we've had nesting in about 20 years, and we've had successful nests at the site ever since the project was implemented. And the biggest thing that we've learned, I think for me, my biggest takeaway is that we didn't have big community outreach as part of this project. It wasn't required through any of the legislation or regulations or that kind of guided this offsetting project, and because of that, it therefore did not, community engagement didn't get a budget line, it didn't get someone who was responsible for it, and didn't happen. And we've seen a lot of interaction because it is such a site that people in that community want to use and have used for a long time. A lot of off-road vehicle traffic, the interaction between people and the restoration, and between the birds, which were the driver of the restoration, has been very challenging to manage, and a lot of that could have probably been avoided had there been a requirement for community consultation built into some of those regulatory processes. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Another very interesting example of how to apply nature-based solutions. Yeah, I'll invite our other presenters to turn on their cameras again. Kurt, Pilar, Kristen, thank you very much for your presentations. We have a lot of interest here, a lot of participants, and a few questions. We have a question here regarding coral reef restoration. I believe that is for Kurt. Kurt, somebody is asking for the CBR assessments of coral reef restoration, if there are any examples where values beyond property damage and human lives have been included. For instance, ecosystem services, emergency response costs, psychological harm of experienced floods, anything like that. So do you have any, do you know of any such work?
Yes, there is a bunch of work on that. Folks have been looking at economic disruption, other services such as, or economic values such as tourism, fisheries, pharmaceuticals. A lot of pharmaceuticals are designed from organisms that come from coral reefs. On the psychological side, I'm not aware of that. I apologize. I'm a geologist and oceanographer. I've been working on the hazard side. There's a lot smarter sociologists and economists that are doing that work, in groups like the U.S. National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration and in academia. But yes, there is work on that topic.
Thank you, Kurt. Another question here for Pilar. Somebody is asking if you are working with the local groups, associations, or if you are working directly with citizens.
In the majority of the cases, we are working hand in hand with the civil society associations, different NGOs. In the case that I presented in the Ejidos in Tabasco, with them, we have worked in different projects, all of them based on restoration, and they have participated in they have participated with a civil association in biological projects. Yes, we get involved, and this monitoring project was carried out hand in hand with the local civil society organization. And in many of the cases, we do work with other types of organizations or groups, but Also, we have received direct consultation from local communities. Yes, that's it.
All right, thank you, Pilar. I have a question for Kristen. Kristen, I know it's more general question. Wondering what advice would you give someone who wants to implement a similar project to yours?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question.
It's a big question.
It's a big question. It's a big question. I think in general, I think really, really getting to know your system, both the ecological system you're working in and the community and social system are going to be the two things that really play into these projects. So what does the community need and what does the environment? And trying to create something that meshes those two things together and serves those two goals is going to be the biggest thing. And getting as many different people on your team with different types of expertise to bring different perspectives to it is going to only make it better.
Oh, thank you. I have a very specific question. Again, I think probably more than one of you can answer it, but since it's related to coral, uh, I will ask Kurt. Somebody's asking if there has been coral bleaching around the coral reefs in the Mexican Gulf of Mexico.
Yes, there has been. And that's one of the greatest things we face in terms of restoration, not only coral reefs, but marshes and mangroves or some of those global climate impacts. Um, there has been those. We do know that some corals do survive. There's also a lot of incredible science going on to try to breed corals or crossbreed corals that have done very well to help be able to keep sure we have coral reefs into the future. But that is one of the biggest concerns with any type of restoration. That if the system's been degraded because of something, we need to remove those stressors or at least restore with something that can handle those stressors before we quote unquote put the canary back in the coal mine and just outplant more things that are going to die for the same reason that they were degraded in the first place. So that is always kind of rule number one of restoration. And so I see, Pilar, Kirsten, please add.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a good. Thank you, Kurt. I think that Pilar and Kristen don't have anything to add. Yeah, but you as we, as everybody works in restoration, you have to guess the future, and it's not an easy task. But certainly, we've got good heads of working on this here, and with the participants as well. So I see we're coming to the end of the webinar. Again, I want to thank all of you, the three presenters, Kristen, Kurt, and Pilar. Thank you very much for being here and sharing all that knowledge with everybody. There were many other questions. We are running out of time on these. I will also say thank you to everybody who joined us. And of course, your questions will be transmitted to the presenters. And there's general questions about our materials at the CEC. You are welcome to send this directly to us through our website so that we can answer them. Don't hesitate. I will also very briefly now make a pitch for our council session that is coming. CEC Council will be happening at the end of July in Mexico City. We invite you to go to our website and learn more about the event. It is an event that is open to the public, and go and see what is happening there. Any questions, please send them to us, and we'll be doing our best to answer you. Um, I apologize. So on this, I will again thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the presenters, and reach out if you have any questions, and we'll do our best. And wishing you a very good rest of the day.